It began as an ordinary restoration assignment. In February 2023, Dr. Margaret Chen, a digital archivist at the Library of Congress, opened a cabinet card from 1898 that she initially labeled simply asterisk, unidentified boy with toy. The image looked harmless, a young boy, 8 or 9 years old, sitting stiffly in a Victorian parlor, dressed in dark formal clothes and holding a porcelain doll in his lap. Archivists had cataloged dozens of portraits like it, Victorian children often posed with toys, pets, books. Anything that conveyed gentility. Asterisk, but something about this photograph unsettled. Dr. Chen almost immediately, asterisk. The boy's expression wasn't playful, shy, or proud. It was broken. His jaw was tight. His eyes heavy, his posture rigid, not the stiffness of Victorian. Posing, but the stiffness of a child holding something he was afraid to lose. His arms weren't loosely wrapped around the doll. They were clutching it. Asterisk still. She almost moved on. Then the restoration began, using high-resolution digital imaging to remove 125 years of water stains. Foxing and fading, Dr. Chen slowly uncovered layers the naked eye couldn't see. As the shadows lifted, the truth began to surface. Asterisk, the boy wasn't dressed for a portrait. Asterisk, he was dressed for Mourning. Asterisk, the black crepe fabric of his clothing, the black armband on his sleeve, the curtains behind him. Draped in heavy mourning cloth. Asterisk, the small framed photograph beside him. Wrapped in a black ribbon, funeral flowers arranged on a table, and then the final detail, barely visible until enhancement. A small card with partial text. Memory of Clara. Age 6. A cold realization washed over her. This wasn't a boy playing with a doll. Asterisk, this was a boy holding something. That wasn't a toy at all. Asterisk, this was a memorial. Portrait. And the porcelain doll in his arms. Something about its face, its hair, its uncanny realism. Asterisk hinted at a heartbreaking possibility. Victorian historian knew all too well. This might be a death effigy. Doll made to look exactly like a child who had died. Asterisk, Dr. Chen zoomed further, magnifying the doll's face until individual brush strokes became visible. The detail was too specific, the features too personalized, the hair suspiciously real. Then she turned the cabinet card over. Barely legible handwriting emerged under restoration. Asterisk, Thomas Whitmore. Age 8. Asterisk with memorial likeness of his sister Clara. Age 6. Photographed May 15th, 1898. Asterisk. The truth was undeniable. Asterisk. This wasn't a portrait of childhood play. Asterisk. This was the last photograph of a grieving brother holding a porcelain recreation of his dead sister. Asterisk. A family's grief captured in one of the most devastating memorial rituals of the Victorian era. Asterisk. And now, after 125 years, the image was finally telling its real story. Asterisk, once Dr. Chen realized the boy's clothing signaled mourning. She returned to the image with new eyes. Every detail she restored confirmed that this was no ordinary portrait. It was a carefully constructed ritual of grief. Asterisk, the black crepe on his jacket wasn't just dark fabric. It was the precise textile mandated for mourning attire in the Victorian era. His black armband, once invisible under layers of decay, marked the death of an immediate family member. When she enhanced the background, she found the entire parlor draped in mourning cloth. Even the windows were covered with the heavy black curtains Victorian families used to signal recent death. Asterisk. Then came the most telling detail. Asterisk, a small framed photograph beside the boy, partly obscured until restoration. Once cleared, Dr. Chen recognized the unmistakable signs: black ribbon, lowered placement, fresh funeral flowers. This was a memorial table, arranged exactly as Victorian households displayed tributes to a deceased child. Asterisk. But the pivotal discovery lay in the doll. Asterisk when digitally enhanced. The porcelain face didn't match the style of common Victorian toys. The features weren't generic, they were Sculpted, precise, unmistakably modeled after a real child. The hair, once matted and faded, was revealed to be human hair. Carefully styled and attached by hand, this wasn't a plaything. It was a memorial doll. A death effigy created to resemble the child who had died feature for future. Curl for curl dot asterisk, Dr. Chen sought confirmation from Victorian mourning experts. Their verdict was immediate and unanimous. Asterisk, the doll was a portrait of a deceased child, and the inscription on the back of the card made it devastatingly clear. Likeness of his sister Clara. Asterisk taken 3 weeks after her passing. Asterisk, suddenly the boy's expression made sense. His quiet anguish, his tight grip, his stiff posture. He wasn't posing, he was holding his sister the only way he could. The photograph transformed in meaning. It was no longer a child with a toy. Asterisk, it was a grieving. Brother immortalized with a porcelain. Reconstruction of his dead sister. A practice born from an era where death was constant in families. Clung to memory through objects. Asterisk, the restoration had peeled away more than physical decay. Asterisk. It had peeled away a century of misunderstanding. Asterisk. And for the first time since 1898, the boy's grief was truly visible. Asterisk, once the truth of the memorial doll became clear. Dr. Chen turned her attention to the family behind the photograph. A boy clutching a porcelain effigy of his sister was heartbreaking, but she needed to know who he was and what tragedy had carved that expression into his face. Asterisk, the handwritten inscription on the back gave her only 2 names. Thomas Whitmore. Age 8 Clara. Age 6, it was enough to begin. Digging through census records, city directories, and death certificates. Dr. Chen slowly pieced together the story of the Whitmore family. What emerged was a quiet domestic tragedy that reflected the harsh reality of childhood. Death in the 19th century. Asterisk, Thomas and Clara lived in Philadelphia on Spruce Street with their parents. Edward and Margaret Whitmore, middle class, respectable, church-going. Edward owned a textile business. Margaret managed the home. On paper, the family looked stable and comfortable. Asterisk. But in April 1898, everything collapsed. Asterisk, Philadelphia newspapers confirmed that a scarlet fever outbreak had torn through the city. One by one, children fell ill. Thomas's school records showed closures, and health officials declared quarantines across entire blocks. Asterisk on April 17th. The Whitmore home was officially quarantined. A red sign would have been nailed to their front door. Asterisk, scarlet fever, keep out. Dr. Chen found the death certificate next. Clara Elizabeth Whitmore died on April 22nd, 1898. At 2:30 a.m., she was 6 years old. The funeral was small and constrained by quarantine rules. No neighbors, no extended family, no community. Grief was confined to the house. The mourning rituals, the ceremonies, the final moments, everything shrank to the 4 walls of a quarantined home. Asterisk. Thomas had been the only child allowed near her. Asterisk. 3 weeks later. The family went to J.W. Black and Company, one of the area's most respected memorial photography studios. They had commissioned a porcelain memorial doll modeled after Clara, her hair. Her features, her dress meticulously recreated. Asterisk, and then Thomas was photographed holding it. A last portrait. A final connection. Asterisk, a brother clinging to the memory of his sister in the only form he had left. Asterisk, Dr. Chen realized the expression she first thought was unusually serious. It wasn't serious at all. Asterisk. It was grief frozen onto an 8-year-old's face. Asterisk, the photograph, once misunderstood for more than a century, suddenly came alive with devastating clarity. This wasn't a quaint Victorian moment. It was a child in mourning, forced to sit still long enough for the camera to capture a ritual that must have felt unbearable. Asterisk, and for 125 years. No one had understood what he was holding until now that Dr. Chen understood who the children were. She turned her focus to the most haunting element of the photograph, The doll itself, Victorian dolls were common. Porcelain faces, glass eyes, painted cheeks. Every middle-class home had at least one. But Clara's memorial doll wasn't common. It wasn't even a toy, asterisk under digital enhancement. Its craftsmanship was too realistic, too carefully sculpted to be a store-bought object. The features were individualized. The slight curve of the lips, the soft roundness of the cheeks, the subtle shape of the eyes. Details no mass-produced doll ever carried. Then came the most chilling discovery. The hair wasn't synthetic. It was real, brown, soft, and preserved asterisk Victorian. Doll experts confirmed what Dr. Chen feared. Asterisk, the doll was made using Clara's actual hair. Taken after she died. Asterisk, and this wasn't macabre to Victorian asterisk, it was love, a desperate attempt to preserve the child they lost. Asterisk, Dr. Chen contacted historians who specialized in mourning artifacts. They asked her to check for specific signs. Asterisk, the stitching style on the dress, the porcelain mold lines, the type of glass used for the eyes. Everything matched the practices of high-end memorial doll makers of the late 1800s. Asterisk families would bring a photograph of the deceased child, sometimes even a lock of hair, to the doll maker. The artisan sculpted the face to match the child's likeness, fired it in porcelain, painted it by hand, and dressed the doll in a replica of the child's favorite. Clothing, asterisk, these dolls were expensive equivalent to several months' wages, so only families with money could afford them. Asterisk, the Whitmores had paid that price. Asterisk, the order records Dr. Chen, uncovered from the Philadelphia Historical Society, confirmed it. $75 in AD 98, equivalent to several $1,000s today. Commissioned by Edward and Margaret Whitmore doll maker, Sarah Mitchell and Co. Type, memorial likeness. Subject, Clara Elizabeth Whitmore. Age 6. Every detail matched Clara's photograph from before she fell ill. And now the heartbreak hit full force. Thomas wasn't holding a toy. He was holding his sister's final body double, created so the family could keep a tangible connection. After burying the real Clara under quarantine restrictions, he wasn't posing for a portrait. He was sitting with the only version of Clara left in the room. The lighting, the posture, the flowers, the ribbon photograph on the side table, all of it crafted not for aesthetic beauty, but for ceremonial mourning. Dr. Chen realized the photograph wasn't simply a relic. It was a ritual, a family's attempt to freeze grief in one image, to hold on to what little remained of a life cut short. For 125 years, people thought Thomas was playing with a doll. In reality, he was holding the last memory of his sister, crafted in porcelain, painted with love, and carried out of a tragedy that shaped the rest of his life. Asterisk, with the truth of the memorial doll uncovered. Dr. Chen turned to the final question. Asterisk, what became of the Whitmore family after Clara's death? Asterisk, the answer, found through census records, city directories, and obituary notes, revealed how a single loss can fracture an entire household. Asterisk, after Clara died in April 1898. Her mother, Margaret, was never the same. Asterisk, the 1900 census listed her with no occupation. A stark change from earlier records that described her as active in church and community. Letters from relatives hinted at depression, so deep she rarely left her room. The parlor where Clara had once played became a shrine, curtains drawn, flowers refreshed weekly. The memorial doll kept in a glass case. Asterisk, Thomas, barely 8, carried his grief quietly. Asterisk, teachers noted he had become withdrawn, gentle, overly careful, as if life could break at any moment. Family stories passed through generations that he spoke often of Clara, keeping her memory alive long after adults tried to bury their pain. Asterisk, his father, Edward, suffered in silence. Asterisk, business records showed his textile company declining steadily. By 1905, the family had moved from their comfortable Spruce Street home to a smaller place on Pine Street, though official documents listed his death in 1911. as heart failure, relatives described him as never recovering from the loss of his little girl. Asterisk Margaret lived until 1923. Asterisk, when Dr. Chen reached the final line of her obituary, she froze. Margaret requested to be buried holding a small porcelain doll. Almost certainly Clara's memorial effigy. Asterisk in death. She chose to rest with the child she could not protect in life. Asterisk Thomas grew into adulthood, carrying the quiet weight of his childhood loss. He married in 1915 and had 2 daughters. But he never forgot Clara. His family recalled that he kept the memorial portrait, this very photograph, on a shelf in his home until he died in 1962. Asterisk he never explained the story behind it. He didn't have to. His daughters said he simply looked at it with a mixture of love and sadness. Asterisk when Dr. Chen released her restoration findings in 2023, the photograph went viral. Strangers were stunned. Some called the doll creepy, others heartbreaking. But once people understood the culture of mourning, the epidemic, the family suffering, the conversation shifted. The photograph wasn't morbid. It was human, a brother grieving, a family trying to hold on to memory. Asterisk a mother clinging to the lost physical trace of her child. Asterisk 1. Image freezing all of that. Asterisk for 125 years. People saw a boy with a toy. Asterisk now they saw Thomas, an 8-year-old whose entire world had just collapsed, holding a porcelain echo of his sister, so never forget her face. Asterisk. And because of Dr. Chen's restoration, asterisk, we won't forget her either.